For 2024, we're providing a video series designed to help you get up and running with the latest features scheduled to be released this year. But before we dive in, let's first look at how ExtendSim versioning is changing and what our release schedule looks like for 2024. The first thing is we are now providing 3 releases per year, and the name of a particular release will be tied to the year it was released in. So this year we will have 3 releases with the names 2024 R1, 2024 R2, and 2024 R3. In R1, 3 new blocks will be introduced: Analysis Manager, Multi-Core Analysis, and Search blocks. In R2, a new Scenario Manager will be released. And by the end of the year, we also plan to release ExtendSim's integration with Python. We already have a Python DLL communicating with ExtendSim. If you would like a demo of this, shoot me an email at anthony.nastasi@android.com. Here's a brief outline of the topics covered in the series. In this introductory video, we provide a high-level overview of the new features without actually demonstrating them in ExtendSim. However, the remaining videos show in detail how to use the new features in ExtendSim environment. We hope you find them to be an effective tutorial for the new software. Please note, each video builds upon the topics discussed in the previous one, so we recommend you take the time to watch them in order. In general, we can improve ExtendSim by either making it easier to build models or by making it easier to do analysis with your models after they have been built. For 2024, we have focused primarily on improving ExtendSim's analysis capabilities for better supporting what we've labeled here as the core analytical process. In ExtendSim, we've all experienced something like the following. First, go hunting and pecking through a series of block dialogues and database tables just to change some input values. Then click the Run button and wait for long periods of time for your simulation runs to complete. And finally, go hunting and pecking again through block dialogues and database tables in search of the results. Of course, there are ways to automate this core analytical process, but historically, that has required significant effort to build such capabilities into your ExtendSim models. In this video, we focus on how the new features support the core analytical process. The 5 analytical strategies shown here share something in common. They all require some application of the core analytical process. In other words, they all require inputs and outputs to be defined, replications to be made, and results to be collected and cataloged. Consequently, in theory, we should only have to set up the core analytical process once. Then, as our analytical needs change, only a minimal setup is needed to transition from one strategy to another. The analysis database, or ADB for short, is the glue that brings these different strategies together. It is the one place where you define the inputs and outputs and where the results are collected and cataloged for you. In other words, the ADB is the hub that works with all 5 of these strategies. So 2 questions come to mind here then. 1, how do we build the analysis database? And 2, how do we use it to store the data that defines a model's core analytical process? We do this using a new block called the Analysis Manager from the Analysis Library. This block automatically creates the analysis database and stores your definitions of the core analytical process in it for you. In other words, use this block to declare your factors and responses, and it will store them in the ADB. And once that is done, the Analysis Manager block will also help you run your replications by doing the following automatically. At the beginning of the first run, it will use the factor definitions to update the input values in your model. And at the end of each run, it will use the response definitions to collect results and store them in the ADB. In the Chapter 1 video, we show an ExtendSim example of how to work with this block. Note this block will be made available in the 2024 R1 release. Once you've set up your core process using the Analysis Manager block, you now have two choices to make. How many replications do you want to execute, and how many cores will be used to run those replications? If you are executing your replications on one core, you would just do what you've always done in ExtendSim. First, you would set the number of runs in the simulation setup dialog, and second, you would just click the familiar green arrow run button. Now, if the Analysis Manager block is in your model, it will use the analysis database to update your model with the correct input values before the run starts. And then after the run is completed, it will grab the results and store them in the ADB for you. But what if it takes a long time to run your model and you want to do many replications? For example, let's say one replication of your model takes 1 hour to run and you want to do 4 replications. Running that experiment on one core would take roughly 4 hours. Conversely, if you could run all 4 replications simultaneously on 4 separate cores, then the entire experiment would only take roughly 1 hour. This is where the new multi-core analysis feature comes in. To spread your runs out over multiple cores, click the multi-core analysis button, which opens the dialog shown here on the right. From this dialog, first input the desired number of ExtendSim instances, second, define the total number of replications to run, and finally, click the Run Multi-Core Analysis button. Under the hood, ExtendSim will make copies of your model, open them up in separate ExtendSim instances, run the replications in parallel, and finally, bring the results back into the analysis database. So let's take a closer look at the mechanics of how the multi-core analysis works. We refer to the instance of ExtendSim that you explicitly opened with your mouse as the head node. This is the instance you opened up your model in. When you start a multi-core experiment from the head node, ExtendSim will auto-launch new instances, which are referred to as child nodes. The process looks something like this. From the head node, open the multi-core analysis dialog, select the number of instances and runs, and then click the Run Multi-Core Analysis button. At this point, the head node uses the factor values defined in the analysis database to update the model and save it. Then copies of the model are made, 1 copy for each child node. These copies are then opened in the child nodes. The head node then tells the children to run replications. When a particular run has completed in a child node, the head node will bring the child's results back and store them in the analysis database. Once the children have completed the experiment, the head node can optionally shut down the child nodes. So let's step back for a second. What does this mean? It means that the only difference between running your experiment on one core versus many cores is simply the amount of time needed to complete your experiment. Yes, I do understand single core only uses 1 starting random seed, while multi-core by definition uses many. But if you have executed enough replications over enough simulated time, both approaches should converge to the same result. In the Chapter 3 video, we show an ExtendSim example of how to work with this new feature. Note this multi-core analysis capability is included in the 2024 R1 release. There will also be a new Scenario Manager block included as part of the 2024 R2 release this September. Like the Analysis Manager, this block also uses the analysis database to store inputs, outputs, and results. However, it also uses the analysis database to store scenarios as well. Please note this new block will give you the option to run your scenarios on 1 or more cores. Finally, let's go back to this picture and do a quick recap of our projected release schedule. 2024 R1 is scheduled to be released in May. It will contain the analysis database, the analysis manager block, and the multi-core analysis capability for running replications on 2 or more instances of ExtendSim. 2024 R2 is scheduled to be released in September. The primary feature for this release will be the new Scenario Manager. However, we also expect continuous improvements to be made to the R1 feature set as well. Finally, we expect to complete this picture by integrating the analysis database with optimization and with a browser-based web dashboard at some point in the future, perhaps in 2025.